it's muted.
Sweet. And we're live, Joel.
Cool.
Thanks for joining me today. We're going to let some people come in here. But yeah, no, it's looking good. Does everything look good on your end?
All good.
Awesome. I don't know if I got you centered. It doesn't look like I got you perfectly centered there, but that's okay. It doesn't matter. I'm going to test out the other view as well. So here's the live streaming view. Actually, it's showing more of my screen than I thought. Okay, that's cool. So I can maybe move like a couple other... Oh, interesting. So I just noticed this. When I do, what do you call it? Expose? Whatever, you know, where basically it like spreads apart the windows so I can, you know, find a different window. It makes your stream go blank and it just shows like purple there.
Oh, that's why.
Okay. Also, you'll see a delay there, but it's not a real delay. In the actual stream, there shouldn't be any appreciable delay here. So,
cool.
Hey, Derek. Thanks for joining in the chat. We'll let some people stream in. Oh, and I should also, let's see. I got Flipper open here. I should also tweet that we're live. So give me a second here on that. Let's see. Got to find the right tweet to respond to here. Where in Germany are you, Joel?
I'm in Berlin.
You're in Berlin. Okay.
So yeah, southeast part of Berlin.
Okay. I spent a couple of honestly not great days in Berlin once.
Okay, why?
Well, partially I was very tired. So I had been to React Native EU, and I had given a talk there. This is 2019, and I after the conference I took a bus down to Prague, and that was really cool. And then I took a train up to Berlin, but yeah, I was, you know, it was just like a lot of travel all at once. And when I got to Berlin, it was just pouring rain. And, you know, reminded me of home here in the Pacific Northwest. It was just dumping rain. And
is this like in like the autumn or in summer?
This would have been September. Hey, Mark.
Okay.
Mark says, I love Berlin. Ahmed says, hey, Joel and Jamon. How's it going, Ahmed? Yeah, so I spent some time kind of like wandering around and stuff. But my German's pretty bad. Like it's, you know, it's 20 years ago. Like I was able to like ask where the bathroom was and, you know, various things like that. But a lot of people obviously speak English there, you know, but yeah, it was kind of interesting. I did actually have a conversation with a Uber driver there that, you know, went a little bit deeper into my stuff was coming up into my brain from 20 years ago that I just hadn't thought of for a very long time. But you know, if you don't use it, it's just like it just goes away.
Oh, but you had you spoke German 20 years ago, or were you saying?
I took 2 years of German in high school, and it was the only class I got a C in, so it was like my worst subject. But I learned some things.
Gotcha. But I think like Berlin is probably the least German city in Germany.
Oh, okay. I suppose.
And someone told me that I don't know exactly the number, but somewhere about like 30 or 40% of the residents in Berlin have like a foreign passport. Doesn't mean that they also don't have a German one, but just like it's a quite international city, I would say.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Hey, Akil. Hi there on YouTube. Kabhara, love Berlin too. Nice. Kate says hello. I love Joel's background. I agree. Joel's got the best background and great lighting too. Mine, I'm all washed out because I got this massive window in front of me. In fact, I should try to fix that a little bit. But yeah. So this is Joel's Friday evening, and I appreciate that you're willing to come on your Friday evening and nerd out about code. Something tells me though that you like nerding out about code though.
Absolutely, and I think now it's not that much else to do.
Yeah,
we're hitting the next the fourth wave of COVID around here. So yeah,
I know, right? Like. It just like the hits keep coming, and it's like I don't know how.
Yeah, you stop caring at this point. It's like it's not a blow. Like you thought like the vaccines would get it, and then you get like the new vaccine resistant one or whatever, and then it's like okay, I'll just deal with this.
Mark says Berlin is a lot more bohemian than other big cities in Germany. Frankfurt, all business. München, all sports. München. How do you spell that? Or how do you pronounce it? München. Okay. All sports. And then Alte says, hello, sir. Yes. Hello, Alte.
Alte, yeah. Alte is an old colleague of mine.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, nice to have you on the stream, Alte.
Hey, Alte.
I forgot to start, or we're started. So, Arn.live and youtube.infinite.red. There we go. Cool. Just making sure we do the promotion. So, Joel, you work for who again?
So I'm working for Klarna, which is the Swedish fintech. Historically, payments, and now like fintech in general, so like banking. But now moving into more like niche of shopping. So I'm working on this app, which is supposed to solve everything in shopping. So like comparisons, watching, like subscribing to price drops, automating checkouts and payments and deliveries, like everything.
Now you told me before the stream that there's over 1 million lines of code.
Right. So we have a monorepo to build the app, and there's like two parts. One is like libraries and some services, like light services in Node, and that's about 2 million lines of code. And then like the client parts, like only building the React Native app is around 1 million lines of code. So it's a huge code base.
That is a lot. Is it TypeScript?
Yeah. So we started out with JavaScript and Flow, and then Flow kind of died, I guess, and it was never really well adjusted or like taken up in the organization. Yeah. And then now we're moving to TypeScript. Yeah. I think all of our new code is in TypeScript, but we still have some old legacy code that's not migrated yet.
Yeah, well, I think that makes this stream awesome because you're going to have this. Well, first off, you've been doing React Native since it basically came out. And also you've been working with this massive code base where performance is kind of a big deal. Like there's a lot of opportunities for bad performance in a several million line app. And so I'm sure you've just about seen everything.
More or less, yeah.
Hey, Darren.
But it's also interesting when you have this big of a project, you cannot really like spend a weekend to fix it. It's almost, you need to have more of a codified process almost.
Yeah.
And having like automation to make sure people don't fall into these traps that we might have.
Yes.
So it's like a next level of reason about these things.
Yeah.
But also makes it more interesting, I think.
A.M. Hinson, thanks for the follow. That sounds familiar. Is that Alex? I think I recognize that. Alex Hinson. Anyway, thanks for the follow. I appreciate it. And Reptisha, thanks for tuning in. I know it's late for those of you over in India, but we've got the India contingent as usual on the YouTube side of things. They don't seem to do the Twitch side. They like the YouTube side. Yeah, that is Alex. Sweet. Hey, how's it going? I've got Joel with me. By the way, Joel, you're Swedish, right?
I am, yes.
Okay, what part of Sweden?
Born and bred in Malmö, which is the third biggest city.
Okay.
So people usually don't know about it because none of the cities are really big in Sweden. But it's the one that's opposite of Copenhagen. So.
Oh, okay. So you're right down on the southern tip there, basically.
Yeah,
right? Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
So people that been to Copenhagen that might sometimes also go to Malmö. That's how they know about it.
Yeah, sorry. Reptisha, sorry. For some reason, I got you mixed up with someone else. You're Russian. Okay, gotcha. Thank you. Well, it's still late there, so, it is what it is. But Vamshi, I know, is from over there. Hello. Yeah, so I know Mark Rickert, who's in the chat, has spent a lot of time over in Stockholm, and he loves it over there. He says, I've spent a lot of time in Västerås, Sweden? Västerås?
Yeah.
Like Westeros?
Almost, yeah.
Wow, Game of Thrones here. Love Sweden too. Yeah, says Mark. Mark spent a lot of time in a lot of areas. He was a digital nomad for a long time. A little more settled down now, barely, but a little bit. Mark works for me. He's a principal software engineer and probably our best performance guy that we have here. So I'm glad he's in the chat. So yeah, no, it's cool. We are going to get to some coding here, folks. It's not just going to be us talking, but I just wanted to kind of settle in a little bit here and chat with Joel. And we'll see how long we have him. He may peter out a little bit early. He may be good to go the whole distance. Either way is cool. We're just doing our thing here. So, so a couple of basic questions. And I, obviously we'll look at real things, but how do you first generally get alerted to there's a performance issue? What's your first? Is it a variety of things, or is there usually kind of a path?
That's a good question. I don't know. I think now we are having more of a continuous work on the performance. We monitor it and then we try to detect it as early as possible.
Yeah.
But one of the ways that we have kind of historically monitored this is through just customer complaints. So we have this bot that will look at all the reviews, and then we can kind of categorize them into different types of issues, and then we can have performance as one of them. So if people talk about slow or buggy or stuttery or something like that, freezing, we can put that into a bucket. So that's a good kind of real world metric. It's not really something you can really benchmark on because you need to have a kind of big sample for that to be having any kind of signal. But it's one of the kind of early signals that we can notice that something is bad. So people complaining about performance, then it's probably pretty bad, basically.
Yeah. That makes sense to me.
And then just I think in general, just dogfooding the app you're working on will. I'm really impatient with slow things. Yeah. So if you use it yourself and you find yourself annoyed at some point, and that's also a good kind of indicator that something is wrong, because devs usually have two good phones, I think. Mm-hmm. So if it's bad on the high-end flagship one, then the majority of users will have a much worse phone and then have a much worse time as well.
Yeah. No, that's a big thing. I've got a pile of devices here next to me, and it's good to run things on old phones and things like that. I've got an M1 Max now computer. I know that you got yours recently as well, Joel, and it's great for the coding experience and developer experience, but obviously we still have to be thinking about the fact that this is the absolute best case scenario that you're looking at here. No, I think those are really good points. And then sometimes you can just sort of you know, if you've been coding long enough, you can sort of have a spidey sense like this is probably slow. You know, what we're doing here is probably slow. We need to probably benchmark it, do some things to figure out like, you know, like what kind of performance impact is it, you know, rehydrating all this information or whatever.
Totally, yeah. So one thing that we also do, which is more kind of maybe when you come some like you notice something is bad and then you want to kind of fix that, then something that's pretty powerful is also something called real user monitoring. So basically you would have like benchmarks on the device of your users, and then they will report like, so this flow, how long does it take, like what's the startup time and these kind of things. And that's something you can then pretty well correlate with different releases, etc.
Yeah.
That's something you can build yourself, or there's also like, of course, a bunch of libraries and tools out there you can look into.
Well, what do you think of Flipper like so far? Like for me, Flipper originally when it first came out, I was sort of like, I don't know how useful this is. But then over time it's been growing on me, and there's actually quite a bit of cool stuff built into it, including our own Reactatron, which we use for some stuff. And I want to actually explore some of its performance stuff. Reactatron, you know, we're a small team. We don't devote a lot of assets, you know, a lot of time toward it. But I still want to explore what's possible there. And it does have an integration with Flipper. But like, what are your thoughts about Flipper? Do you use it quite a bit?
So what I think is powerful with Flipper is, especially for the maybe like the companies or the companies of my size, it is very easy to build your own tooling in that case.
Yeah.
So if you're like a small shop, then maybe you won't kind of build your own developer tools, these kind of things. But if you're someone like size of Facebook and Google, you'll probably build all of your tooling yourself.
Yeah.
But if you're in the middle, then I think Flipper is a great tool to just like add something specific to your application or your kind of domain specific problems.
Yeah.
And that is pretty quick to set up and and pretty powerful as well, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
And then of course, like there's just developing for it has some drawbacks. I think it's a Electron thing, so it's pretty slow sometimes, and crashes sometimes. But
now Hoopcast, thanks for the follow. Appreciate it. Yeah, no, I get it. Yeah, that's something we've run into as well with Reactatron, having to kind of balance that. Reptitia says flat list. Of course, flat list. Yeah, is always. I heard actually that maybe there will be a replacement for Flatlist in the works at some point that uses the new architecture. So I might actually
I saw some hints on Twitter in the past few days.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
We have for React Native Radio, we have a guest coming on next week. Well, we're recording next week. I don't know when it'll be released, but from Facebook talking about the new architecture, and I might sneak in a little like, is that on the roadmap? Because it'd be really nice. Flatlist was a big improvement over the previous list view, I think. But yeah, I mean, it comes with its own set.
I think there's a lot of foot guns with Flatlist. Like, if you don't really understand how it works under the hood, it's super easy to make something like incredibly slow.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a lot of what performance stuff is. It's like you can just about make anything fast with enough work, but it's about like how easy is it to make it not fast? You know, how like, and that was like one of the things with Redux. I felt like, I don't know, I'm not a huge fan of Redux, and it felt like there were a lot of things where you could make your app slow. Now it's gotten better, but like you can make your app slow just you know, relatively easily. That's definitely still the case with MobX State Tree as well. And there's some things I'd like to actually learn in this session, and as we move forward, that could help me figure out why MobX State Tree gets slow in certain cases and stuff. But But yeah. By the way, Carlos says Flipper is awesome when it works. That's funny.
I think Carlos is a current colleague of mine.
Is that right?
Yeah. I think what he might be referring to is that there's a lot of kind of native dependencies with Flipper, especially for iOS. That has been some issues there, according to like a few different versions. So like using it with if you have like using frameworks, for example, with the CocoaPods, that's not always easy. And then to solve that, they duplicate a lot of dependencies. So then it's also kind of slow to compile, etc., etc. But I think on Android it's a lot better. Yeah.
No, I definitely feel that. Zohair says methods to avoid many re-renders in the context API.
Like don't update.
Don't use context API very often. Context is fine, but like it's very easy to like trigger a lot of unnecessary re-renders with context if you're not careful, for sure.
Yeah. Set once and never change, basically.
Yeah, as much as you can. I mean, unless it's like, dark mode or something. But if it's something where when you do change it, a complete like re-render is okay, then fine.
So I actually don't like dark mode in context, but maybe that's something we can
tell me about it.
Talk about later.
Tell me about it. Actually, tell me about it right now.
No, I think so. There's this saying like if all you have is a hammer, then everything is a nail.
Yeah.
There's quite often I see with React Native developers is that they try to solve everything with JavaScript.
Right.
And when it comes to dark mode, then they like need to set up listeners to the appearance changes, and then they need to re-render, and then there's like this sometimes kind of a janky transition when you change, where like some things that are native colors will be like transitioning to the new color, and then there's like a hard switch to the other side, and then if you have like assets that they also need to kind of be managed that way, so then it adds like an overhead to anything that has like a color or like an asset that has like a specific appearance depending on the dark mode, etc. And this would then incur for like every render more or less. So some tools that I've been working on is just like simplifying using the native things. So in my company, we worked on this thing called platform colors. It's not really, it's more of a kind of convenience tool. Like maybe I can send you the link. And you can put it on the screen. Let's see, platform. So like using platform colors today, which is like a React Native primitive. It's kind of janky because you need to kind of define them on the native side.
Right.
And there's like different ways to like reference them on iOS versus Android. And if you do also web, then there's like a third way. So what this one does is like you define like this is your palette, this is your different types of names, and then it will just generate all the native colors into your native application, and then it will provide you like a unified JavaScript API to do that with types, etc. And then you can use those as like your regular colors. Just import it, and then your code would be as if this was like a variable of like a hex code, for example.
Right.
But it will add you then dark mode. You can also have some other types of kind of assistive stuff like high contrast.
Yeah.
And you get all these kind of nice things where like when you transition, that doesn't require a re-render and is animated because the iOS will animate it. And
that's amazing.
Your code base is a lot simpler.
Totally. And you know what? You're exactly right. Like how many engineering cycles have been wasted, to say nothing of the code itself, but how many engineering cycles have been wasted on trying to engineer this one problem, which is dark mode. Like, you know, like, because how often otherwise do your colors change on your app? Like, this is rare,
right.
and usually like an update is fine for that.
Yeah.
So this one
thing, and it's solved already once, right? So like the teams at Apple and Google, they thought about this once, and
yeah,
they have all this tooling that we could just like use directly.
We got a few more. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, and on the other side, like if you're talking about assets,
yeah,
something that I've seen in a lot of apps is that they want to use like vector assets. And one reason to do that is like scalability, of course, but also to be able to like pass these custom colors, for example.
Yeah.
So I worked on something else and with kind of a similar approach, basically. So it's a library called Vector Image. It's, I think, one of my most popular libraries, Vector Icons. It's not the same one, it's Vector Image.
Did you make Vector Icons?
This one, I did make that one, yeah.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you for that. We've been using that for years and years and years.
Cool. Yeah, this one supports platform colors out of the box. But this one is for a bit more advanced stuff. I think I sent you the link on the chat. But this one also kind of takes your SVG as a primitive and then transforms that into the kind of natively supported formats. So like Android has one called what's called like vector drawable, I think. And then on iOS, for newer versions does support SVG, but older versions need PDF. So it will transform this SVG into PDF.
Really?
And you can do like both on iOS and Android. You can then have dark mode for these assets as well. So
that's amazing.
It solves that use case as well.
I'm a little behind on chat. Let me catch up on some of that, Joel. So Radko says Flipper is problematic on Windows. Also, Flipper is not fully working on the M1, unfortunately. We're going to find out because I just installed it on my M1. We're going to figure out what's going on there. Facebook, so JZY says Facebook should make Flipper in React Native instead of Electron. Mark Rickert says version mismatch between your installed NPM version and the desktop app version can create issues with flippers sometimes, not so much in more recent versions. So he's dealt with those issues in the past. Raptisha says, I heard that Flipper slows down builds, and Joel did allude to that earlier. Sam says, I don't know what he's saying there. I don't know what that is. Akil says, could you please write the tool's name in chat? Maybe someone, Derek or Mark, could drop those tools name that we're talking about into chat. A little easier than me trying to do that. Aditya, hello. Thanks for coming in and hanging out with us today. We're up to 26 viewers, which is solid. Mark says, I just now made the connection between your name and your GitHub name. Thank you for all of your libraries. Use them all the time. And I want to echo that, Joel. I didn't realize you were behind all this stuff. So, you know what? That's really cool.
Thank you.
Raptisha says, Joel, thank you for vector icons. And Mark says, Flipper works fine in Rosetta on my M1. In Rosetta, okay. And then Radko says, nice tips about the platform colors. Yeah, that's really cool. I hadn't seen that. That's a really neat looking library for sure. But I think the broader point of what you just talked about there was really, really cool, where you're saying like everything looks like a hammer. And so in order to make this happen, we have to use React to re-render. We have to hit it with context. We have to have all of this structure for this one thing that happens. I mean, honestly, you could, this would be possible, store all of your colors in a plain old Java object, right? If you didn't want to use platform colors, which looks amazing, but let's say you just had it in a JavaScript object, and when you want to change, you just set state in your root component so that it re-renders, and it goes out and grabs the colors it wants as it re-renders. It'll re-render everything because it's in the root, right? And you can totally do that. So you could do things in a much simpler way than using context and checking it everywhere,
Yeah.
It's an idea. All right. Let's see. Ahmed says he links to React Native vector icons and puts a heart and a star. JZY says, thanks for React Native performance, which we are going to be talking about today, by the way. That is on the docket here. So go follow Joel on GitHub. And let's see here. React Native performance is right here. Let's go there. So, I'm not on the right scene here. Let me go back to this. All right. Tell me about React Native performance. First off, how'd you come up with this idea and what's it all about?
So this was actually, it has evolved quite a lot during the years. I would say there's primarily two versions. So the first version was more like Flipper was released. I wanted to just give it a try and see what it was all about and see if that was something worth investing more time into. So I think this was probably one of the first like outside of Facebook plugins available. And back then it was more like I want to just see how my startup time was kind of performing, and then see like which aspects of the startup time that I could improve and kind of track them as I was iterating over kind of fixing those.
Yeah.
So it had like a few different ones, using the different markers and performance tools that React Native has out of the box. So depending on which platform you have, React Native provides certain timings, such as like what's the time to like run the JavaScript bundle, like parse it and execute into memory, and how much time does it take to like kind of mount the initial screen. And on Android you have like a bunch more kind of like what's how long did it take to initialize this bridge module, etc. So it would just take those and like echo them out to you in kind of a simple way. And then of course, like I had plans to like add more like custom metrics, I guess.
Right.
But I tried to do that using the built-in tools, because React Native also has these kind of things.
Right.
So you can actually reuse them. But then as kind of our needs grew in my company, I realized that whatever React Native was providing was not really enough, because we wanted to use the same metrics that we use for kind of our local development, our benchmarking, and reuse monitoring to be the same. So I didn't want to kind of define those 3 times. And usually like every platform would have like their own custom way of kind of defining these things.
Right.
So I didn't want to do that. I wanted to do something that was more accessible to people that might be familiar with. So I started kind of breaking up this functionality into different pieces. So one was just like getting the metrics. And that is like the React Native performance package. So what it is basically like a spec implementation of the web performance API.
Okay.
So if you do down like these things on the web, it's exactly the same, but it has like some extra functionality.
Okay.
Just because the browsers are not really up to speed with the latest spec.
Yeah. Oh, okay, cool. Ahmed just asked in chat if it's an implementation of the web performance API, but you just answered that.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a JavaScript implementation. So you could actually use the same implementation on web if you wanted to.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
So
it's basically a polyfill then.
Right. I think you probably wouldn't want to, but you could if you wanted to.
Yeah.
So like there's like some specifics, like for example the I think it's called a performance observer. Which is not available on all platforms. And they're like especially like kind of newer things. It's not fully, so like you might not be able to kind of provide details on your metrics, etc.
Right.
So this one is pretty simple. more or less, you will just like mark different places in your code.
Right.
So like you say, this happened, and then you can combine those to be durations. So you can say this is the start point and this is the end point.
And you can measure between arbitrary marks that you've created.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really cool.
So usually what you do is like, you say that these things happen, and then you can kind of piece that together into more like a cohesive, interesting metrics. So what it also does is like it exposes those things from React Native as well. So like if you have these native metrics, these will also, and you link the library, they will also like kind of be magically appearing into this library. So it's not a requirement. You can use this only like the JavaScript way, but you can also kind of add the native aspects.
So
and then this one you can then utilize to stream to Flipper,
right?
Because then you get like the kind of the way you can kind of visualize it pretty easily to understand, like this is my bottleneck, or this is taking a lot of time, I need to invest my time there. And that's done via Flipper, but you can also take the same data and then pipe it to your analytics tool, for example, or some other performance monitoring tool that will then monitor like your real user monitors, or like whatever the thing takes in the real world.
Yes,
because that's ultimately what you want to have. It's a more dirty metric. We have a lot more noise, so maybe it's not the one that you want to always measure between changes, but it's something that you would. It's like this is the metric that you actually care about.
Yeah. Okay.
And then you can also like the third one is then like if you run some like more automated synthetic performance tests. Like you probably should do in your pipeline.
Right.
Then you can also pipe that data into like your build status or like some kind of local database over your metrics. So it does all of that basically by kind of splitting out the pieces. And then it has like one additional thing, which is you can also provide just generic metrics that you can then kind of display on Flipper, for example. So like if you care about like this is the amount of re-renders on my home screen, or this is the size of this download, or I think one metric I provide is like the size of your main bundle, for example.
Okay. Do you mind if we try some of this stuff out?
No, go ahead.
Let's do it. Let's just show people kind of what it looks like. First off, this is a kind of a dumb question, but is this supposed to be yarn add -d, or do you actually install it or add it as a direct dependency?
So I guess that depends. So I would say Flipper aspects of it is definitely D. And the React Native performance, if it's something you want to ship to production to do like real user monitoring, then it's like a regular one.
So you could ship this to production if you were really interested in using it, but otherwise you would just put the if dev thing around it, right?
Yeah, but then ultimately I'm not sure like what the difference is, to be honest. Like the dev dependencies and the
I know. I don't think Metro
like
cares.
A client, it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah, I don't think Metro cares. It's more of a semantic difference than anything. We're gonna add it as a development dependency here because we're not shipping anything to. Whoops, yarn add, and we'll just drop that in. So I've spun up a new Ignite app. You can see, and for people wondering why Joel flashes to purple once in a while, it's because when I do this, Streamlabs goes nuts. So it is what it is. You'll just have to deal with it. So we have a new Ignite app here. We have Reactatron. We have a list here that gets loaded. Wow, is it broken? Might be broken. Let me see it on iOS. No, it's fine on iOS. Android's broken. Okay, well, we'll have to figure out what's going on there. Let's see.
Was it Flipper,
Got
you
some
think?
logs. It's possible it's Flipper, because Flipper did give me an error saying that there was something going on. Let me reopen Flipper here. Whoops. And Flipper. Let's see here. Stuff's in the way. Okay, applications, Flipper. There. And this could just be an M1 issue. We could just look at iOS, I guess. Yeah, failed to initialize ADB, disable Android support, or configure a correct path. So I don't know if I want to worry about Android right now. We certainly can look at it, but I'm just going to go ahead and quit that for now, and we can look at iOS for the main part.
I think there's like some kind of setting you can define the paths.
Okay.
Flipper.
Yeah, I'll have to look into that later. I literally just installed Flipper, so. Okay, so it did pick up on perf1, which is cool. And we have logs. Of course, I just opened it, so I'd have to probably reload, and we have some stuff here. Cool. All right.
So for my one or my plugin, you also need to add it to Flipper itself.
Ah, perfect. Okay. So
and it's a bit annoying because there's like my old one is called React Native Performance, I think, and then this one is also only called Performance. So you need to make sure to not add the old one.
Okay.
I tried to get them to like be able to deprecate it, but then I waited like a year for them to respond, and they just closed the issue. So
yeah. So I have to do this here in my app entry file, right?
Well, I guess yes. But you also need to add it to Flipper itself.
Flipper itself. Okay. So let's see. Where do we go here? Plugin manager, probably. And then we're looking for performance.
Yeah. I think you can search.
I'm not. Oh, install. Okay. Yeah. So performance.
So maybe there's like a install plugins.
Okay. So there's two here. Whoops. There's 2.0 and there's 0.6. Which one did you say was the right one?
The first one, the
performance.
2.0.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Reload Flipper. All right. Okay. All right. And then have to drop this into my index here.
Yeah. So what this one does is, so actually the performance plugin in Flipper is like decoupled to from the my performance plugin.
Yeah.
But what this one does is like it provides the kind of glue between those. So you can send your own metrics based on whatever you have, whatever data you want to send. But this one is like provides you that kind of the standard setup. Which is like some native stuff and then whatever metrics you have yourself.
Okay. So I may have missed a step here. I need to go back to this and make sure I've done. Oh yeah, I need to add this. Okay. Yeah, that's it. Let's see. Go to our pod file. And
I think it should auto link.
Oh yeah, that was only for manual linking. Okay, never mind. Yeah, it should work. Okay, I did pod install there. And then let's go back and reload. It still says native module for Flipper seems unavailable. React Native Flipper is installed. For iOS, that pod install is run. I did that. Maybe I need to restart my packager. It's possible.
Did you recompile?
I did not.
Oh, that's why.
All right, let me check chat here. So, did you use Firebase Performance before, and what did you think of it? Ahmed says.
So I did use it. I think one aspect of it is it makes the app slower. So it might be worth enabling it to kind of understand what your bottlenecks are.
Yep.
But I think it's not that amazing at that because it's like very native focused.
Yeah.
So I didn't get like a ton of insight out of that. I think the best insight I got was out of the network requests. It's like it will show you which ones that are slow basically. But then usually you would have some kind of or I think you should have these metrics on your own logs, right? So you should know which services are slow.
Yeah.
So yeah, I disable it because I want to save the bandwidth or like the bundle size, but also actually the runtime performance is worse for this one.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so where do I go here?
So I think you need to check the disable plugins and then enable it.
Yes, performance right there. Enable plugin, nice.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, and then I'm just gonna actually wonder if I could kill it and rerun it here, perf1, and see what it tells me. So right out of the box, it's telling me native launch is 116 milliseconds, bundle size 6.1 megabytes, probably, right? But megabytes.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Basically,
it's like the correct term, right? So
yeah. A really cool timeline thing here. That's cool. I like this. So bridge setup and run JS bundle. Okay. What would you be looking for in these?
Yeah, so you would have, so if you look at the docs, there's also possibility to enable network requests. So you can kind of trace everything you do, at least on the JavaScript side of things. So one thing it could be like you could try to correlate network requests with bottlenecks, for example. You can see that.
Let's see.
Like
network
nothing happens until
right here. Okay.
Yeah, nothing happens until this thing fires. Then probably you'll be kind of network blocked, for example.
Okay.
Another thing is like you can see if there's like this kind of waterfall kind of thing.
Yeah.
Usually it means you have some kind of bad setup. Okay. So usually when I do things in parallel and then you don't have things depending on each other. And then just like generally you would see like what are like which bars are the long ones, and then you want to attack those basically.
Okay, that makes sense. So I have a request here. I can so I can bring in set resource logging enabled here and drop that in as being true there. We also have performance, which I'm not actually using right now, but
I see you have a pretty cool plugin, by the way. The one that gives you the size of packages.
Oh yeah.
Like the Bundlephobia one.
That one is, what is it called anyway? Size of or something like that. But yeah, it's kind of nice. It shows you the gzipped amount. Whoops. Okay, so yeah, that's pretty cool. So set resource logging enabled, and if I reload here and then go to that demo list, I'm curious to see.
Do you have any network requests? That's a problem.
Say again. Sorry.
Do you have any network requests firing in this app?
Yeah, this should come from a network request, I think. Yeah, this comes from here. This should be dropping in.
Okay.
I believe. In fact, I'm going to open Reactatron just to verify. So this is our app that we built, and let's see here. Yeah, we have a get right here. So this is firing right now, and you can see that we do get information back. So we do have that happening. Where would you look usually for information here? Should it show up here?
I think it should show up as the green things. So maybe if you like, do you see the timeline, and then you can scroll to the right, like in Flipper.
Oh yeah.
Because there's like a network thing there. So it might
look at that.
Be happening
it shows up
a lot later.
It does show up. Very cool. Okay, and go a little wider here. So it shows the link that we're pulling in. That's good. And then what else can you do with that? What else would you do here?
Right. So you can. I think this one is especially good if you want to kind of measure things in the startup, for example. So you can kind of see the breakdown of like all the pieces that contribute to your startup time.
Good call.
So then you would typically add like whatever you do in your bootstrap phase, like
right.
Oh, now I'm I'm doing the, I don't know, fetching like a refresh token or whatever.
Right.
You would mark those as like a timeline thing, and then you can get all those up, and then that would like enable you to kind of see where you should kind of spend your money.
So let's say that
to optimize.
We don't do this, but let's say that when we create the root store here, we go out and make that request. So it'd be root store dot character store dot get characters, I think. So we'd do something like, and there's no reason to await it right now, but we're gonna do that. Get characters, eagerly. All right. So we're just gonna do that, and whoa. Go back here, and I don't know, maybe, okay. So I just refreshed, and did that not show up at all?
Yeah, there's no network piece on it yet.
So we are fetching there, which we don't need to do anymore on that screen. Well, yeah, I'll do that. So, all right, let me go and see if I'm not. Yeah, it is loaded already. Okay, let me check Reactotron. It's Reactotron. Reactotron's not showing a request. Oh, I know what's going on. Okay, so I have to go to our setup root store, and we're just like rehydrating from async storage here. And I don't want to do that. I just want to like load fresh every time.
But that's a good thing to measure though, actually, because that's also something that usually can improve a lot on.
Ah, good call.
So we can maybe do like a mark and a measure on the rehydration.
Right. Good call.
Because this will also block your initial render, I think.
Oops, I don't need that. Yeah, we'll do that. Let's do that for sure. But quickly, let me see. Oh yeah, there it is. Wow, that was quick. Was that a cache hit? Probably.
Probably, yeah.
Sort. Okay. I don't remember how to make it not do that.
I think easiest thing is like add a random to.
Oh yeah. Good call. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, good call.
I think you can also add there's like a cache policy argument I think you can pass, but I think what it actually does if you do a cache policy thing is just like adds a random
so that's what it's doing anyway.
cache passing thing. Yeah.
Okay. Let's go. Oops.
Yeah, I think you need to make it like map random or something.
That's better. Yeah. There we go. By the way, have you used GitHub Copilot yet?
I have not. No.
All right, you need to.
Okay.
It's amazing. It is amazing. Ahmed says, "What about Sentry?" Hey, John Major. Oh, and by the way, thanks for the follow, Carlos. Appreciate it. I know that was a while ago.
So actually, I'm not sure if it was that Carlos, but the Carlos in my team actually started looking into this. So I think they bought a company last week or something, also in this space to do like real user monitoring.
Yeah. And
it's something that we're looking at to actually integrate with them to kind of do this tracing in production.
Yeah.
And it looks pretty cool, but I don't have that much experience with it like so far, but it looks pretty cool actually.
Yeah, that's awesome. So obviously, now it shows up, and what's cool is you can see the 87 milliseconds there, or sorry, 84.7 milliseconds that it took. And what's really cool about that is we didn't have to do anything other than, set the resource logging enabled here. And actually, this should probably be back in our somewhere in here, I guess, just because I want to make sure that it's loaded up and set to enabled, early on. Cool. And then
you might also want to do this only in development, for example.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. So this might need to be, you might do something like that. Yeah. Yeah, really cool. I could totally see this being useful right here. Now, you mentioned about rehydrating. Let's see. So I'm going to leave that, but the character store, no, it was the setup root store. We have all this right here, which basically loads, and it loads from async storage here. And so we could, right here, we might want to know what, how to actually, like how long this is taking, this particular load. So
you import performance?
Yes. So we don't need the set. So feel free, Joel, to correct me. I may be going off, in the wrong direction here, but I'm just going to. So in this case, we probably want to do performance dot mark. Is that right?
Yep.
And then load from async storage. And there's a start there. Is that what you would normally do? Like a underscore start?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good pattern. But
okay.
It doesn't really matter what you called it, but you can understand what it means, right?
Right. Now, how would I tell it, hey, I want to log over to Flipper? Would I just log it?
So you can, you either do like this, like you would mark the start and end, and then you combine the two, but you can also just do measure. And I should know the API, but I think the first one is the name of the measure, and the second one is the start point.
Okay.
So then it would be
so I wouldn't even need the end.
Yeah, no, you don't need it, but it might be, you might set these things up separately, for example. But,
right. So,
but this should work with just the start.
But I could also do another mark here, mark, and this is create root store there as well, and so then it makes sense to do. I want to know just this part right here.
Yeah,
like that. Okay, that makes sense. So really curious to see what this does. And would that go into logs, or where would that go?
It should appear, I believe, in the timeline.
Okay.
So you have this thing called app now. So there's 3 types of metrics. One is the one you get for free, and then one is the network, and then the other one is your own ones.
So this right here, line 43, load from async storage, corresponds to the name of this.
Yeah, exactly.
5.6 milliseconds. That's not bad. Could be better, but really, honestly, pretty fast.
That's pretty fast, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're not loading much. And now we might want to throw in there also measure, and this is create root store, right? And then we would want to take the end, and we would want to go to create root store end. And if I'm not being lazy, I'd probably add another mark right there or something, but that's fine. So reload that, come back to the timeline, and we see that actually creating the root store takes a lot more time than loading from async storage. So this is interesting because this gets at a little bit of the issues I've been having with MobX state tree. And this is where diving in and figuring out why would be pretty interesting. So we have the character store. Whoops. And in there we have the characters, and then we have a number of characters that get loaded in. So if I go over here, Demo list. There's that many characters. Is that everything? Let me go to. So character store has it has 20 items. Yeah. So you can see that there's some data there. So 20 items is taking quite a bit of time. I mean, it's not like huge, but it adds up. So especially when we're just talking about a small one. So this is a situation where that could be very, very interesting.
So do you have this set up to some kind of like developer tools? Because sometimes also like the logging itself takes some time to do.
Good point. Yeah, I'm not sure how that would impact it. I mean, it definitely does get loaded into Reactatron, so it's possible that this is impacting that. And of course, we are on a dev build here, and MobXState does a bunch of optimizations for prod builds. But it is, yeah, it's just something kind of interesting there. Ahmed says, let's enable Hermes. Yeah, we totally could, and see how that impacts, for example, bridge setup and run.js bundle.
But I think it's already running Hermes, right?
It probably is, yeah.
Yeah.
I
think it's the default nowadays. I think maybe
enable
it's not.
Hermes is actually.
I think they were talking about
now.
making the default in an upcoming release.
So this is for. Let me go here. Pod file properties.
But actually, in my experience, Hermes does not always equate to kind of faster performance in the app. So like it's good for startup. It's good for like memory consumption, etc. But like if you do heavy work, it's not always faster. So kind of depending on the application, I guess.
I don't know if I have to pod install.
I think you do, yeah.
Okay. And then I'll run yarn iOS again, and we'll see. Let me go look at, what is it right now? We're at 244 and 240. JZY says, what does performance.measure do in release mode?
Exactly the same.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you would.
I mean, it's decoupled from the Clipper thing. So that's just like, that's a reporter that hooks into the APIs of performance, where you can like observe the measurements and use the pipes them through to Flipper. But that thing you can just strip out of production, right?
Okay.
So then you can pipe it to something else, like your analytics tool.
Yeah. So we're rebuilding iOS here. So that's pretty interesting. How often are you measuring things in release mode?
You mean how many metrics we have, or
no? Just like if you were
sampling size.
Just in broad strokes, like, are you pretty often measuring things in release mode, or are you more working in dev?
Oh, you mean like that? So I would say the most common use case that we have is that we work on some thing that we think will improve performance.
Yeah.
And then we have like an automation of like a typical user flow.
Right.
And then we will record that and then do that the amount of times that we need to get like some statistic correlation. So that's in typical case, maybe 25 times, sometimes 50. And then we will do that in release mode. So the thing you see in Flipper, I think it's more for when you want to understand the actual breakdown of things. So how they correlate and the different like sizes. It's not so good for like understanding exactly how long something takes. Like to do like more synthetic benchmarks to kind of compare between different versions, because they vary quite a lot, and especially in development, then you might get some red herrings. Because developer tool or something like that.
Okay, we reloaded with and that was 363. So it actually got slower.
Yeah, but also like in development with Hermes, what it actually do is that you compile JavaScript and then Hermes needs to parse that. So it's actually slower in development for the startup.
Yeah.
But it's good to use Hermes anyways, because then like it will behave the same as it would in production.
In production, yep. Okay, gotcha.
Any production, you have like this binary format, right?
Yeah, so it doesn't have to do all of that once it's, yeah, that makes sense. Oh, that's good to know though. That's a good point, because people might enable it and be like, Hermes is slower, but that's just in dev mode.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. By the way, Alpha, happy Friday to you as well. So okay, very cool. So we have that. We have load from async storage. We have create root store, and then obviously we could go through and look at other things. But could you walk me through measuring sort of like component render times and things like that?
Right. So I think for that, then usually the React profiler is a lot better.
Really?
Okay. Yeah, I think so, because then what React Performance is good at measuring is like maybe like one metric in like a funnel of things.
Yeah.
So what React DevTools is good at is this like optimizing like amount of re-renders, and you would see like a breakdown of which component you need to optimize by like giving you this kind of frame graph kind of thing. And then you can also tie that with like certain interactions, etc.
Yep.
So this is more of a profiling thing rather than like benchmarking thing. If that makes sense.
Absolutely. Why is it not recording when I reload here?
Yeah, so this is the bad part with this implementation in React Native, and that is like every time you re-render or like reload the app, it will actually lose connection with the DevTools.
Okay.
So what I do is like when I'm using this profiler, and then when I kind of try to understand the impact of the initial render, then I do all this behind the button. So
you click the button,
have the application disabled, and then I press record, and then I press the button to render the thing.
Actually, I'm going to do that. Just to show people what you're talking about. Whoops, I'm not going to do that right now. So let's go to the, let's see here, the app TSX, let's say. And then in this case, would you like have a state or something like that? Like,
right, yeah. Like so, use state.
Yeah, so ready, set ready. So we've got that. And then, by the way, thank you, GitHub Copilot. And then we would have we probably find somewhere in here where we just check and we say ready, and we do this, of course. Or do you do this differently?
I mean, so you can also just like do a like if statement above, and then you do a return and the button, and it's easier to delete.
Oh, I see what you're saying. That's better. Yeah, good call. So if not ready, so return button, whoops, on press set ready. I think we're bringing in our button. Yeah, we're bringing in our button, so we need to change this to text. Okay. Oh, I like how it's way up there.
Maybe you need to center it as well.
Yeah. Okay, I'm not good at styling, so what do we get? Or, whoops, not text. Just do a view.
View?
I guess. And then I need to bring that in. And then style equals flex. That's probably not enough. What else do we need?
Flex 1, and then justify content center, I think.
Justify content center. There we go. All right, cool. So just, throwing in, and you could obviously put in like a if dev thing here if you want, like all this stuff. I don't know, like probably don't want it all the time with the dev, but so now we come over here. We're already loaded up. We hit record, and then we start our app. and then we hit stop. And that gives us, okay. Yeah, makes sense. That's a cool idea. Mark Rickert says React Component Profiler ++. He's a fan. By the way, he works with us, and he did a presentation on this a few weeks ago. Did some really cool stuff. He says, I wish the profiler had a toggle button that would automatically start profiling on app connection to Flipper.
Yeah, maybe there is one. I just didn't figure it out yet.
Yeah. So we have all this stuff, right? And then we have like native stack navigator is clearly there's something going on here where there's more of a load time there, probably going over the bridge or something. And then we have a bunch of stuff here. And you can kind of like drill down further into this. Header config, scene view.
Yeah, so these durations are like the accumulated duration with all the children.
Yeah.
So what you want to look for is the steps. So like if you have a tower that is very kind of linear or like wide, then that means they're not doing anything. But then when it drops off to be more narrow, that means something is taking a lot of time. And then of course you can also look for the colors. So like if it's green, bluish, then it's fine. If it's more on the reddish, yellow side, then something funky is going on.
Yep. So
and I can see that they're using native stack navigator.
Right.
So I think that's React navigation, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep.
So that's another one of my pet peeves is there's already something solved in the native side with navigation, right? So to get everything from like the performance optimizations and the accessibility things as well as the performance. So if you just use something like, I don't know, Wix, they have this native navigation, recommended navigation.
Yeah.
You don't need to render these things. And then it gives you a lot better like gestures and snappiness and performance.
Yeah.
Because now you can see you spend it's not a ton of time, but still like a third of the frame to render the navigation.
Yes, totally. And when he's saying third of the frame, that's because we have a certain number of milliseconds. It was a 16 point something, 16.6 or something milliseconds to render each frame if you want to hit 60 frames per second.
And actually, like the newer devices, the what's it called, like iPhone 13 Pro, whatever.
Yeah.
They're actually they have this thing called ProMotion.
Yeah.
Where your frame is actually hot fat, so it aims at like a 120 hertz.
Yeah. So you've got 8 milliseconds or something in that range.
Right.
So if you're doing 6.3 milliseconds of your 8 milliseconds, you are definitely dropping frames here. Because everything else is going to take a lot longer. So Joel, we've been streaming for a little over an hour now. I'm going to take a little break for both of us, and then we'll come back to this. And hopefully hey, if you're in the audience and you've been enjoying this, please do put in chat what you've been enjoying, what you want to see us look into next. And then we'll be back in like 5 minutes. All right, cool. I'm going to go ahead and on both of our webcams, I'm going to pause that, and then we'll come right back. All right, let me get you back on there. All right, cool. I gotta say, so far, Joel, it's been awesome. Super cool stuff. Like, I don't know. Like, I get that a lot of this stuff is more basic for you. This is stuff that you've been doing for years and years and years. But I know there's a lot of people watching that haven't been doing a lot of this stuff. And to be honest, I'm learning a lot of this stuff too, because my developers like Mark and people like that are the ones that typically do a lot of this work. I'm more of a support role. So for me to get a chance to jump in here and actually try some stuff out and work with some code, I mean, you know, I coded every day until about 2015. And then after that, I switched roles, and then mostly kind of like, you know, leadership management, not doing a lot of code. That's why I really love streaming, because I get to go back into the code, which I started when I was 12. So, you know, I love code. I'm a code geek, and yeah. So this is fun stuff.
The same. Like I really like solving problems in general, and
yeah.
That's the easiest way to get these kind of boosts of like, I created this or I solved this problem is with code. And
yeah,
I'm sure there's like some fun things with like leadership and stuff, but
yeah.
For me it's more like the difference between like just boring,
yeah,
difficult things versus like, oh, I succeeded at this.
Yeah,
it's like it's way less.
Yeah.
To get those like boosts of like, I did this great thing, then it takes like 6 months.
Yeah. No, you're right. Like, yeah. No, you're totally right, because leadership management, you sort of have kind of like second order, you know, successes. It's like you know, I put Mark in a position to succeed. That's cool. But it's not me, you know, it's like Mark succeeding and I'm kind of vicariously successful that way. And
you can be happy like inside of you, but like you cannot really claim his success, right?
No, not at all. Like all I can do is like make sure I stay out of the way, you know? And where like programming has always been that for me as well, where I enjoy the tech for the tech as well as building what we're building, but I like the tech, you know, it's fun. It's like the first time that I was able to draw a box on the screen with QBasic in 1992 or 3 or whatever was like, it like blew my mind, and I had to show my whole family, who were very unimpressed, but I was impressed. Like I drew a square on the screen, and I did that, you know, it wasn't you know, some, you know, program that I installed, you know, like it was me that did it. And then like, just building on that over and over, it's fun. Like even just little things like, hey, I created a button that now you hit this button and it does this. It's tiny stuff, but it's like, it's cool, you know?
Yeah. I think it's like the same driving force as people liking arts and craft, or like woodworking, these kind of things, or just growing your own potatoes. It's like you make something that wasn't there from the beginning, and then maybe it's not impressive, but for everyone else, but you kind of know that you put the work in, and you see the results pretty kind of concretely.
We have a couple of other comments here. Showing the profiler in action is awesome. More, please, from Derek. And then Alex says, how would you recommend using React Native Performance in production?
Right. So I can just tell how we use it. So we have this like unified analytics tool that we measure like business metrics, different kind of funnels, and we also use that to like have some information about the users, like they may play in these markets and then have this this device and these feature flags enabled, for example.
Yeah.
And then we could also see like they're using this version, and then we add the metrics that we get from React Native Performance to that. So we can see like, oh, this is an issue, especially for these kind of users. We can follow them across different markets. We can follow them that this really got worse in this release, or it got worse in this kind of time. So we can see that, well, maybe if it's affecting all releases at a certain time, maybe it's like a backend change or something like that.
Right.
Or we published this in a different way, or we added more data to the response, or whatever it could be.
Yep.
So you can kind of correlate that across a bunch of different things. So if you have it in a more like siloed way that is only for performance, then
right.
it might be more difficult to make these kind of correlations and understanding what is actually going on.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great way to say it. And obviously, while in a lot of cases you can kind of correlate between like dev mode performance to some degree, there's just nothing like running in prod. Like that's where the rubber meets the road. Like you gotta do that.
Yeah. So we got a new question that I think is kind of interesting.
Oh yeah. So I'll just read the
question.
Sorry
for stealing your thunder there.
Yeah, no, that's good. I need help watching chat for sure. JZY says, can we examine how many and which JS modules got loaded and required and loaded at app launch in a huge app? I've seen only complete bundle loading time. A detailed view of the same can help in deciding lazy loading code inline requires. That's a great question.
Yeah, so I think for our app, it's a big code base.
Yeah.
And one of the kind of biggest contributing factors to this was like the parse and execute phase of the bundle size.
Okay.
So we definitely want to kind of only parse and execute the code that we're going to use for the initial render, right?
Right.
And so I did try inline requires.
Yep.
But I found that it's very easy to do this the wrong way. So basically how that works is instead of loading everything at once, you would do it per require basically.
Right.
So that means if you do this at the startup for every require,
yeah,
it will like have a penalty for every require that you make. So you need to kind of make a list of like, these are all the files that I make when I start the app, so that they can be kind of into one bundle basically.
Yeah.
Not really a bundle, but like not taking this like extra penalty.
Yeah.
And that's fine. There's tooling to do that. It's not so difficult, but it's kind of difficult to automate. Yeah. So if you're in like a small project, you're the only developer. That's kind of fine.
Yeah.
If you're at a size of ours, where we have like hundreds of developers, each pushing code all the time, it's like impossible to keep this up to date.
Right.
So like over time, it will deteriorate and actually be worse. And in our case, it was actually worse even if we did the optimizations. Yes, because like things happen over the time as you render as well. Not only like the initial one, but like you fetch new data and then new stuff comes on the screen, etc. So it actually was the worst thing. So I wouldn't really want to. Maybe if it works for you, fine. But for us, it was not the right way. So then I would kind of question the measurement of actually which requires you make. But there are tooling to do that. You can look it up on the React Native docs. It will show you, like, there's an API you can call.
Okay.
But
do you mind if we go look? I wouldn't mind checking that.
Yeah.
That be under the performance guides, or let's see, performance.
That's a good question. Maybe if you search for
right here,
inline requires or something.
Oh wait. Why is that on 065? Okay. Latest version.
Yeah,
sure.
This is probably the one.
So let me go back to performance, and then RAM bundles and inline requires large number of screens that may never be opened during a typical usage of the app. So this is sort of like an initial, hey, if people are going to be looking at all these screens, then you probably don't necessarily want to immediately reach for inline requires, just because they're going to get loaded anyway. And yeah, right. Okay. Useful to apps that have large amounts of code that are not needed for a while after startup. Okay, and then inline requires. So this is the sort of normal thing where this very expensive, supposedly, component here gets loaded. And in this optimized version, we have a very expensive is just null to start with. And then when it's null, we go out and we require it. And you notice the .default because it's exported that way. So that's an inline require there. And this is a class component, of course, but you could do the same thing in a functional component. And then it will make sure that it exists first and then load it. Okay, interesting. Yep. So let's see. I wonder if they have Hermes. They say don't use RAM bundles. Don't use those together. Preloading inline requires. Okay. And feel free to jump in anywhere here, Joel. I'm just reading the docs here.
Yeah. So I think this is the section where it's interesting. So this is where you would require .get modules. This is where you can kind of figure out which ones is used in the beginning.
I see. So you get modules from require itself, and you grab the keys, which gives you the IDs. And then you loop through those. You filter them based on whether they're initialized or not. The module is already initialized. That's a property, it looks like. Then you map through the ones that are already loaded, and you just grab their name. Okay. And then for these ones, you just check the ones that are not. Okay, that makes sense. And then you can log those out. File name packager module paths.js. Excuse me. So then you could export those. Okay.
Yeah, and the reason you want to export those is that they would then be not inline required when you do it in production.
So I'm just dropping this in as they put it, basically.
Yep.
Here, and then we will reload the app, or it probably already reloaded, and we'll go look at the actual. Okay, yeah, here we go. So this is what's getting loaded. Okay, so module exports equals, and we have all of this stuff.
Yeah, and I think for this to work, I might be wrong, so don't quote me on this. For this to work, you also need to do requires. Like, you cannot do static imports.
You can't do static imports.
Yeah.
Through your whole app?
So typically, right. So that kind of sucks, right? So
yeah,
I think it might be that you can transform these to be requires, and then do, like, in your navigation. Usually, this is where you want to segment these things. So if you set your navigation up so that you would require your components, you can do that kind of as you render the components. And I think that should make it fine.
I see.
But if you statically import all your components in the root, then that kind of negates the whole idea of this one.
So to me, this is a very specialized tool that you probably don't want to just reach for and say, I want to use this all the time. It's probably something where it's like, we know that this is a very expensive component that spends there's a lot of time just even getting the JavaScript in there, like parsing it. And it's only used in very rare situations. That's a lot of ifs in there. Like, it'd be a special situation. Let's say that you had this really important or really complex graph type thing going on or something like that, but the only time you look at it is maybe after you finish onboarding or something like that, you know, or while you're onboarding. I don't know. And you don't ever look at it again after that. Like, that's it. It kind of makes sense to do that. And there are other ways to approach this sort of thing. You can just drop it into like a web view or something and like render it, you know, obviously that's not ideal in every situation, but then you wouldn't be loading anything, you know, if you,
So an alternative that I'm more into is something called Repack. It has had like several different names, like React Native WebKit Toolkit or Webpack Toolkit, and whatever. The current name is Repack, and it has a different approach. So instead of having like one bundle that is memory mapped, it will use actually multiple bundles. And it uses Webpack under the hood, so like all the kind of algorithms and
the power of Webpack.
The power of that's been used on the web for several years. You can kind of use directly. So as a user, it's a much more simple thing. You just do this import functions like import require or async import. I don't know what the correct name is, but you can do the static imports and you can do like runtime imports with a function. And these would then typically become a chunk. Well, like Webpack kind of decide what becomes a chunk based on your config. But that's like the general idea. And then you put this behind a React lazy. And then that's all you need to do basically. And then add a suspense.
That looks way better. How stable is this? Is it pretty stable?
I don't know. So it's the Webpack part of things is stable. But what this one does is basically it provides a set of tools that would make it interoperable with React Native. And this is pretty new tool, and the kind of the scope of this is pretty big. So it needs to kind of replicate all of the things that Metro does. That is kind of very specific to React Native. And it works, but there's like a lot of kinks that we have discovered taking it to production. So I think like now it's a lot more stable. But when we started using this was not really the case. And I think one thing that is pretty bad about it is the performance. And that's not Repack's fault. That's just Webpack
itself. And by performance, you don't mean app runtime performance. You're talking about when you're building it.
Exactly. So the runtime is probably better because Webpack has these things like you would do, for example, tree shaking, which is not supported by Metro. So to do tree shaking in Metro, you need to do all this other kind of like you need to fake it basically. And that's not great, and it's pretty fragile. So Webpack will most likely give you a smaller bundle. And make your kind of the developer experience of those kind of things, optimizing things, a lot simpler. But at the expense of like a store build most of the time.
And it's worth noting here that they do have a tip. If you're just starting with React Native, it's better to stick with Metro. This is an advanced tool for advanced situations. Basically, you have a very large app You know, like I mean that does happen. Obviously, very large apps, and you need that power, you need that flexibility, and you are also running into you know, load time issues and stuff like that.
I think another thing with this one is like it gives you a different kind of power. So like Webpack is very pluggable, flexible.
Right.
Whereas
exactly.
Metro is very kind of designed for one use case.
One use case.
They're like you can do some stuff, but with the Webpack you can build these other types of workflows and use stuff from the web, for example.
Mick Nova asked, how do multiple bundles of Repack work with something like Code Push?
That is a good question. I haven't tried that. There's like another aspect of Repack which is kind of interesting, and that is you can roll your own Code Push in a sense. So
I see.
They have this concept of local and remote chunks.
Yeah.
So basically, you can say that this is like a very expensive piece of the application that is maybe not used that often. You can say that I want to load this from a CDN instead of like shipping with the app. Or you want to say that I want to like ship this part of the application separately from the main app. So that's kind of the Code Push way. But with Code Push, you need to kind of ship everything with each things. Mm-hmm. But with this, in theory, you can kind of decouple the deployments of separate pieces of the app. Yeah. And that's not maybe something that the typical app scenario is needing, but if you're in like a bigger organization, that is definitely something that is very attractive.
By the way, there's a discussion going on in chat about which kind of wine you're drinking right now. So
yeah. So we had discussion about that earlier, and it's on the money. It's Riesling. I'm in Germany after all, so it's from.
Oh, Derek asked earlier.
I think it's like west of Frankfurt. It's like in the Rhine River somewhere. They grow this Riesling.
Gotcha.
It's a pretty good one. Yeah.
So that answers the Code Push question. That's interesting there. Cool. Well, I think I'm going to, man, I honestly, Joel, I could talk to you for so much longer. I want to do more code with you. There's so many more things I want to like just explore with React Native performance, as well as Flipper, dev tools, how you approach this stuff. There's so much here. Like there's so much. It's like, I don't know. I guess to me it's something I'd love to delve much more deeply into, but you know, and I know we had about 20 to 25 people watching for the whole stream, which is pretty solid. But a lot of people that I talked to said I can't make it during that time, but I'm going to watch it later. So we're going to get a lot of views later. Hi everybody on YouTube. So that's pretty cool. So like, I guess I have a few thoughts just more in general about how I approach performance. One is obviously, you know, I think performance should be something you're thinking about relatively early. It's harder to go back and diagnose later. It's possible. We have lots of tools and stuff, but as you're building the app, you should be thinking, you know, am I blowing up memory here? Am I blocking everything and making it drop frames? As you mentioned, Joel, you should even have tooling that's measuring the stuff as you go and alerting you, hey, your performance just got worse. Did you expect to get worse? You know, stuff like that.
Totally, and I think it's quite easy to kind of get stuck in a certain architecture that is very expensive to get out of if you don't think about it from the beginning. Yeah,
totally. Yeah, like remaking Redux badly in context.
Yeah. Exactly.
Another thing that I think is important here, and this is something I've talked about with Mark a bit, is making a clean room in your app to test things. So, it's sometimes really hard to like separate out what's making this slow, and I want to see if I just take this, this rehydration that's happening, or this re-render that's happening, and do it with all of the other clutter around it. It's just hard to pick out the signal from the noise there. So it's possible to just make a little clean room, like even that little button we made at the very beginning where you click the button to go. You could make a little if true, that easy turn on and off, return just that component, or wrap it or whatever, and just that. That's all I'm looking at. And now let's measure their performance. Now let's just look at it. Let's try triggering stuff. Let's try. Hey, thanks for the follow or the subscribe, I guess, on YouTube, Suleiman Kojak. I don't know how to pronounce that. Sorry. Thanks for hanging out with us. But make that clean room and then measure it there and get that as dialed in as possible. It sometimes can be that you have interaction between multiple things, so they both look fine on the surface, and then you put them together and there's some issue. But for the most part, you can usually, narrowing that down and reducing like noise around and making this clean room and testing and checking things can be very, very helpful.
Totally, I agree. So in general, the more like stuff you have in your metric, the harder it's going to get like a signal.
Yeah.
So you might make good progress, but there's too many things contributing to that number that will also have some kind of variance.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of impossible to see any kind of progress.
Yeah.
So I totally agree with that, but it's also kind of difficult sometimes that you get stuck in like optimizing something that might not have an impact on the user.
Yeah.
So I think it's
true.
Like while you do that, you should also definitely like do like what's the impact for the user.
Mm-hmm.
So like they probably want to have the app to start fast. They want to have low FPS drops. They want to have a certain flow be fast.
There's like perceived performance, right?
I want to have these things that when I measure in production, that these should be as closely mapped to a certain like user behavior, and not to be like too micro benching.
Yeah.
So micro benching is perfect when you kind of iterate over a certain thing, but not so great when you want to measure like something over time, and like in the real world. I think
that's a very good point. Yeah, you definitely don't want to be the perceived performance is the thing that really matters. We're not mining Bitcoin here. It's not about throughput, right? It's about the perception of the user, and I think that's a pretty, it's an important piece. By the way, Kabhara says Riesling ist lecker.
Yeah, it means it's tasty in German.
Tasty, yeah. Mark says turning parts of a very large app on and off doesn't help much in that regard in my experience. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend that. If you're going to do the micro benchmarking, it should be, number one, you've identified that yes, this is contributing to like actual user experience problems. And number two, doing it in such a way where it's easy to do. Like it shouldn't be something where you're spending a lot of time untangling things and then putting it back. That is not at all what I'm talking about. I'm talking about you can literally just drop something in, kick something off, do a bunch of measurements, drop in those performance dot marks, and then do the dot measure, see what's going on, or run your flame graphs or whatever you're doing, and figure out how this is going. What I don't like doing is guessing a lot. I don't like to sit there and like
100%.
I hate guessing.
You can never work on performance without having numbers.
Yeah.
So some things you can, if you are working with like perceived performance, where you kind of do these bells and whistles to kind of distract the user in a sense to making it feel faster, sure, you can try to use that like more qualitative metrics, such as like showing it to your girlfriend and see like does it feel faster,
right? But
it's not something you can really use to do like real performance work.
Yes.
Where you make something faster.
Yeah.
Because it's so many times where people I'm just going to slap React Memo and everything, and it's going to be faster. And they're making it slower, right? Because they just add extra work without actually fixing the root cause.
Exactly. Yeah, we've worked with some clients where they've maybe over our recommendations said we're going to use Memo and use callback for everything, and the reality is that not only doesn't solve the problem, it in a lot of cases it sometimes can make it slower, and it also for sure complicates the code a little bit in ways that makes it less readable and less maintainable in the long run. And so I don't like guessing, like hey, this feels slow. Okay, it feels slow. We've identified that. Now let's put some benchmarks around it. Let's put some numbers around it. And as a consultancy, what I like to be able to do is not just go back and say, I think it feels better. I want to be able to say, it used to be 800 milliseconds. It's now 200 milliseconds. We have some more work to do, but it's a lot better, Like that's a pretty important thing to be able to say to a client. And then hopefully they fund more research into it. But yeah.
And to kind of piggyback of what we talked about earlier, this is also some one of these things that makes programming fun for me, because it's very tangible. Like you had this number before, and then you had this number afterwards. Yeah. And then that makes like working with performance pretty fun. Yeah. But if you don't have that, you just like have a slow app, and then you don't have any tools to solve that or know that you progressed, then it quite easily becomes like this. Yeah. Like could have despair.
Because you can develop theories about why something is slow and go work on it and spend a lot of time on it and feel like you kind of like solve the issue that you thought was in your mind. You put it back together and it's just as slow, because the reality was that it wasn't actually the thing holding it up. There might be something else async that it's waiting on while this is finished long ago, or it's just too small of a number to really make a difference. Yeah, that's really good stuff. Joel, thank you so much. Seriously, huge thank you for hanging out with me on your Friday evening. I really enjoyed it. Good to kind of get to know you as well. And thanks again on behalf of the React Native community for all the cool open source stuff that you do. I'm definitely going to try to drag you back on my stream sometime, and maybe we can sneak you into a React Native radio podcast at some point as well. I'd like to actually get Mark in here too at some point. I don't know if we can figure out a way to do 3 people on a stream, but he's got some good performance stuff as well. And there needs to be, as we were talking about before the stream, there needs to be more performance related, like good performance content out there. A lot of the performance content out there is just blog posts saying, like memorize your components and stuff like that, which is just it's not great advice, and it doesn't really give you anything actionable, in my opinion.
Super happy to be on the show, and I'm happy to join the podcast as well.
Perfect. Awesome. Got a bunch of thank yous in the chat there from Make Nova, from Mark, from Jay, Derek, John Major. So yes. And John Major says, keep sending me React Native packages for the newsletter, Joel.
Yeah, I sent him like a list at some point, like 4 packages or whatever.
That's awesome.
when I was productive. I'm not as productive anymore.
Dude, yeah, that's fantastic though. Yeah, John Major is the editor-in-chief of the React Native newsletter. Derek's actually an assistant editor as well, and so that's cool. That's pretty awesome. John Major also comes on the podcast with me, so if we interview you, then that'd be cool. All right, well, we're going to shut down the streams. Thanks to everybody watching today, and also people watching on YouTube later. Is about an hour and 50 minutes or so. Really good content here. Please do hit like, subscribe, all the other things. I do appreciate it when people, it helps us continue to make good content. And we'll have Joel back at some point. So thanks a lot. We'll talk to y'all later.